Every city in America tells two stories, one of opportunity and prosperity, and another of despair and struggle. As the sun sets on bustling streets and thriving neighborhoods, shadows stretch over those who call sidewalks, parks, and abandoned buildings home. This is the hidden reality of homelessness in America, a crisis that goes beyond numbers and touches every aspect of our society. But how did we get here? And is there a way out? Stay with us as we uncover the layers of this ongoing tragedy. The scale of the problem. On any given night, over 580,000 people in America are homeless. That's the population of an entire city, forced to live without stability, without safety, without dignity. And these numbers are likely underestimated. Thousands more go uncounted, hiding in cars, abandoned buildings, or couch surfing to avoid the streets. What's even more alarming is the diversity of those affected. Families with children now represent a significant portion of the homeless population, and among them, single mothers are disproportionately impacted. Veterans, those who once served their country, make up about 8% of the homeless population, and LGBTQ+ youth are at much higher risk, often rejected by their families and left to fend for themselves. This isn't just an urban problem. Rural areas, though less visible, are grappling with homelessness as well. Limited resources and lack of infrastructure in small towns make the issue even harder to address. From coast to coast, the crisis is growing, and it's not just a symptom of poverty, it's a symptom of neglect, the roots of despair. Homelessness doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow erosion, a cascade of events that leaves individuals and families stranded. The roots of this crisis run deep and are intertwined with America's economic and social systems. First, the housing market. Over the past 2 decades, rent prices have surged while wages have remained stagnant. In cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, a 1-bedroom apartment can cost more than $3,000 per month. For millions living paycheck to paycheck, one financial setback, a medical bill, a job loss, a car repair, can lead to eviction. Then there's mental health. Decades ago, the deinstitutionalization of psychiatric hospitals was meant to humanize care. Instead, it left thousands of mentally ill individuals without support, pushing them onto the streets. Today, 20 to 25% of the homeless population struggles with severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, often untreated. Addiction is another root cause, though it's rarely as simple as people imagine. For some, drugs and alcohol lead to homelessness. For others, substance abuse is a coping mechanism, a way to numb the pain of life on the streets. The stigma around addiction often prevents people from seeking help, trapping them in a cycle of despair. And finally, systemic inequality. Decades of policies favoring the wealthy, underfunded social programs, and racial disparities have created a society where the safety net is full of holes. Homelessness is not just a personal failure, it's a systemic one. Prostitution and exploitation. Among the many tragedies of homelessness, one of the darkest is the exploitation of those who have nowhere to turn. For many women, and increasingly men and transgender individuals, the line between survival and exploitation blurs when their only option becomes selling their bodies. Homelessness strips away layers of security and stability, leaving individuals vulnerable to predators who prey on desperation. Pimps, traffickers, and exploiters often target homeless individuals because they know their options are limited. Promises of food, a place to sleep, or even a small amount of money are enough to trap someone into a cycle of survival sex, trading their bodies for basic necessities. But for most, this isn't a choice. It's a means of survival in a world that has abandoned them. Women living on the streets often face an additional layer of danger: sexual violence. Without the safety of a locked door, many women are assaulted in shelters, parks, or abandoned buildings. To avoid being targeted, some turn to prostitution as a way to seek protection or favor from those who might otherwise harm them. Young people, especially LGBTQ+ youth, are disproportionately affected. Rejected by their families and ostracized by society, they often have no safety net to fall back on. Many are lured into sex work by older individuals who offer a facade of care but ultimately exploit them. These young people face compounded trauma, homelessness, rejection, and the abuse inherent in their circumstances. Even for those who manage to escape the streets, the scars of exploitation linger. Survivors often battle severe mental health issues, including PTSD, depression, and anxiety, as well as physical health problems caused by lack of access to medical care. Society, rather than supporting them, often heaps blame upon victims, labeling them as criminals or moral failures. This stigma isolates them further and makes recovery even more difficult. The role of crime in homelessness. When survival is your daily battle, morality often becomes a luxury. Homelessness and crime are deeply intertwined, not because homeless individuals are inherently criminal, but because desperation forces difficult choices. Petty theft becomes a means to eat. Trespassing is the only way to find shelter from the cold. Shoplifting, often for necessities like hygiene products or food, leads to arrests. But these crimes aren't driven by malice. They're born out of need. And instead of addressing the root causes, our system punishes survival itself. Encampments, often unregulated and overcrowded, can become breeding grounds for more serious crime. The lack of safety within these communities forces individuals to arm themselves, sometimes escalating conflicts into violence. Human trafficking rings exploit the vulnerable, luring individuals with promises of food or protection, only to entrap them in cycles of abuse. The criminal justice system, rather than offering solutions, often exacerbates the problem. Fines and jail time for minor offenses create a cycle of debt and incarceration, making it nearly impossible for individuals to escape homelessness once they're entangled with the law. Drugs and the vicious cycle. The role of drugs in homelessness is complicated. For some, addiction is the beginning of their journey to the streets. For others, drugs become the only way to cope with the harsh realities of homelessness. The constant fear, hunger, and exposure to the elements. Opioids, methamphetamine, and crack cocaine are the most common substances found in homeless communities. The rise of synthetic drugs like fentanyl has made the problem even deadlier. Overdoses are now a leading cause of death among the homeless, with shelters and outreach workers struggling to keep up. But addiction isn't just a personal problem, it's a public health crisis. Sharing needles spreads diseases like hepatitis and HIV. Overdose deaths in public spaces overwhelm emergency services. And the stigma around drug use prevents many from seeking help, perpetuating the cycle of addiction and homelessness. The invisible victims. Amidst this crisis, it's easy to overlook the most vulnerable, children. Over 100,000 children in the U.S. are homeless, and for them, the impact is devastating. Homelessness disrupts their education, mental health, and sense of stability. Imagine trying to do homework in a crowded shelter or worrying about where your next meal will come from instead of focusing on your future. Elderly individuals also face unique challenges. Many work their whole lives only to find themselves homeless in their final years, often due to medical expenses or the death of a spouse. These are the people society was supposed to protect, yet they are left to fend for themselves. A path forward. Despite the bleakness, there is hope. Across the country, cities and communities are experimenting with solutions. Permanent supportive housing, which combines stable living arrangements with access to mental health and addiction services, has shown remarkable results. Programs like Housing First prioritize giving people a home without preconditions, proving that stability is the foundation for recovery. However, these programs face resistance, from funding shortages to local opposition under the guise of "not in my backyard." Overcoming this requires a shift in mindset. Homelessness isn't a problem to hide. It's one we must confront head-on. What's at stake? The cost of homelessness goes beyond dollars. It's a reflection of our values. Do we continue to allow people to live and die on the streets, or do we invest in solutions that prioritize dignity and humanity? The answer lies in collective action. Homelessness isn't inevitable. It's a choice we've made as a society, and it's a choice we can change. From advocating for affordable housing policies to supporting community organizations, every action matters. Change won't come overnight, but with sustained effort, it is possible. Homelessness in America is a crisis, but it's not unsolvable. Together, we can build a future where everyone has a place to call home. If this story moved you, share it. Start a conversation, and let's work together to turn despair into hope. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Together we can make a difference.